I'm going to talk about how to get a created stitch that we have made in our Stitch Composer program into our Janome 15,000 sewing machine. So this is your home tab of the different categories of stitches. So we'll just go ahead and select our decorative stitches and then created stitches. You're going to see up here on the screen, just always pay attention to some of the different tiles that you're going to see here. We're looking that I'm on first page of 2 out of created stitches. So one of the things that I do want to mention here also is that this is saying that we're on page 37 out of the 38 pages of stitches that is in this machine. All right, so 1 page out of 2, and right here we can see that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 3. I've got 15 stitches on this page. If I navigate over here, I think that I can also put another 15 stitches on this page here. So a total probably of about 30 created stitches in this program. I'm not swearing by that. I could be a little bit off on that. At any rate, the point is that you're going to have a limited amount of decorative stitches that you can store in the created stitch section of the machine. We'll talk about that later, about how you can save some of them also in the hard drive of the sewing machine. But back to how do we get this stitch over here. One thing that you have to be using is a formatted USB stick, and the reason why is because your machine is going to want to look for your created stitches on your USB stick, and the first step of this is we're going to open that icon for getting a stitch into the machine. So this is what I'm talking about. Up here on the top, you're going to see that we are automatically directed to the ORD folder. That's one of the 2 folders that was created on our USB when we formatted it in the machine. The other main folder that it created was the EMB folder that the embroidery machine wants to find embroidery designs on. These are ordinary stitches, also known as decorative stitches. Okay, so depending on which USB port your USB is in, it'll be either number 1 or number 2. Mine is highlighted with number 1 right away. So I did an experiment because there's 3 different places that you can actually store your stitch at, and your machine will be able to find it. If I use my upward arrow, so let me just back up. So where I'm at right now is in the ORD folder. The other folder that gets created when we format our USB is an ORDF folder, ordinary folder, which is inside of the ORD folder. I wrote my stitch into 3 different places. I put it inside the ORDF folder, and I would just navigate to that stitch to find it. I called it SC, and there everything is in alphabetical order, and this is the stitch right here. Okay, so that is going to be one of the logical places that you might want to store this stitch. I don't want to confuse you, but if you're just here in the plain old ORD folder, not inside the ORDF, I also stored my stitch here. I would just use that downward arrow to open up this ORD, and here is the stitch I was just talking about, the SC stitch. So I could also open it from here. In addition to this, if you were really kind of in a hurry when you were writing your design or just wanted to keep it in general, I just hit that upward arrow. Now I'm just in the plain old outside area of my USB stick. You can just see that here on the screen, USB. Here's my EMB folder that embroidery designs are in. Here's the ORD folder. So I'm going to just go ahead and hit the down arrow now that I'm just here on the USB general area. Go downwards, and there's my SC stitch. So I wrote it in 3 different places to demonstrate to us all that you can do that, either in the USB or, let's go back up, inside the EMB. Oh, nope, I'm sorry, I did not mean EMB, I meant the ORD. ORD, if you can't see it here on the screen, it's because you need to hit the downward arrow. There's the stitch. Let's go back up again. Or inside the ORD, ORDF, where there's lots and lots and lots of designs that I have saved onto my USB. So let's just find it, okay? One of 3 places you can put it. This is the stitch right here, and I would want to practice stitching this out, so I would simply select it, and there it is on the screen. Actually, I was in the combine mode, so here it is. This is how that stitch would look that I just created. And so let's say to the next step. let's say you've run out of space here for storing machine stitches in this created stitch folder. Your machine will let you know when you've run out of space, and when that happens, you will have to delete something out of this screen. All right, so what you would need to do then is just determine which stitch you want to get rid of by hitting the trash can and then the stitch, and then it would make room for that new one to come in. So just kind of keep that in mind also. But I've got plenty of space here for now, so I'm not going to actually delete anything. But that's the process. Touch the trash can, it would get highlighted, turning dark, which means then you could pick your stitch that you want to trash to make room. If I want to, rather than trashing this stitch, if I decided I wanted to save it somewhere on my sewing machine, I can do that instead of trashing it. And then I could trash it after I save it. This is how you're going to save it. You cannot save it as a whole line of stitches. Up here on the screen, you're going to notice that if I touch this tile for being either in the mode where I'm stitching the same stitch over and over, or I could select my combine mode. This is the process. So you're going to see that more tiles have opened up with some different options here. So I simply select the stitch that I want to save, and I'm going to just move up my arrow so that it is highlighted in red. And then I'm going to select the tile that says I want to save a stitch into a folder. What happens now is we have navigated over into the sewing machine. That's why it's dark. The USB sticks are not highlighted. Because I want to save this stitch into my machine, I already have created some different folders here that I have saved different stitches into. This is my created stitch folder that is in the hard drive of my machine. To create a folder, all you do is come down here to the bottom part of your screen and you touch this icon for creating a folder. So I want to save this stitch. Okay, I'm going to open my created stitch folder. I'm going to then select the pencil slot here so that I can name my design. And I did have it just named SC, and I'm just going to keep it with that name for right now. I haven't stitched this out, so I don't even know if it's going to be something that should be saved. Just demonstrating how to do it. So right now I'm verifying that I'm naming new name SC, and I'm going to say OK. And this SC has now been created as one of the stitches in my created stitch folder. See that? Just keep paying attention. We're still in the process of saving. You can see that arrow there. So once again, I just need to verify that I am saving it. And it's asking me if I want to overwrite it because the same file name exists. And I'm going to say OK. The reason why is I know that the file is the same file because this is my second try at making this video. So I'm going to say OK. Now that means then that I can, if I needed to make space here in this screen, I would be safe to go ahead and hit my trash can and delete this file because it is saved safely over in my decorative stitch category. Let's just make sure that it's there though, okay? So let's come down to, let's open a file. I can then come to my sewing machine, to my created stitch folder, and I would just navigate down here until I get to SC, and there it is. And there it is right there, ready to sew. So I have saved it safely, and I would be okay to go ahead and delete it off of my USB if I wanted to. So anyway, I hope that this information was helpful and maybe helped to clarify some questions that you might have had about how to get your stitch composed stitches into the Janome 15,000.